The night the wounded SEAL commander was rolled into the trauma bay, the entire hospital seemed to hold its breath. His body was broken, his face bruised and pale, and the look in his half-open eyes carried a darkness that made even seasoned surgeons hesitate. This was Commander Matthew Carter, a legend whispered about in military circles, a man who had walked through fire and lived, now lying motionless beneath harsh white lights. Everyone feared him, not because he was cruel, but because his reputation was carved from impossible missions, ruthless discipline, and an unbreakable will. Nurses stiffened when his name was spoken. Doctors lowered their voices, and the hallways felt colder, as if the building itself knew it was sheltering a storm. And yet, in that charged moment, when fear and uncertainty filled every corner, a new nurse named Grace Holloway stepped forward, carrying nothing but trembling hands, quiet courage, and a heart determined to do what everyone else believed could not be done. Before the story unfolds further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion to change even the hardest hearts, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach people who need them most. Grace had only been working at the hospital in San Diego, California for 3 weeks. Fresh out of nursing school, she carried the soft uncertainty of someone still learning to trust her own strength. She had grown up in a small town in Ohio, raised by her grandmother after her parents died in a car accident, and her dream of becoming a nurse was born from countless nights sitting beside hospital beds, watching strangers offer comfort when her world had fallen apart. That dream now placed her at the center of the most intimidating case of her short career. When she saw Commander Carter, surrounded by machines and urgent whispers, fear threatened to paralyze her. But beneath that fear was a deeper pull, a quiet voice reminding her why she had chosen this path. So while others stepped back, Grace moved closer. The commander's injuries were devastating. Shrapnel wounds riddled his torso, one lung had collapsed, and internal bleeding had pushed his body to the brink. The surgery had saved his life, but only barely. When he was transferred to intensive care, his condition remained critical. Rumors spread quickly through the hospital. Some said he was too stubborn to heal, that his body would reject rest just as fiercely as he rejected weakness. Others whispered about his temper, about how he terrified even his own men. As shifts passed, nurses avoided his room, volunteering for other patients whenever possible. But Grace kept returning. She cleaned his wounds, adjusted his monitors, and whispered soft reassurances even when he lay unconscious, as if some part of him could still hear. When Commander Carter finally woke, the fear surrounding him seemed justified. His eyes snapped open with startling intensity, scanning the room like a battlefield. The machines beeped wildly as his pulse surged, and tension thickened the air. The first time Grace stood at his bedside while he was awake, her hands shook so badly she worried she might drop the syringe she was holding. But she steadied herself, took a breath, and focused on the simple human truth that beneath the scars and rank, he was a man in pain. Slowly, his outbursts lessened when she was there. He remained silent, guarded, and distant, but something about her calm presence seemed to ease the storm inside him. Days passed, then weeks, and progress was painfully slow. His wounds became infected, complications arose, and twice his heart faltered dangerously close to stopping. Each setback hit Grace hard. She stayed late, researched relentlessly, and consulted senior nurses, refusing to accept that this was the best they could do. Late one night, while charting his vitals, she noticed subtle irregularities that others had dismissed as machine error. Trusting her instincts, she pushed for further tests. The results revealed a hidden internal injury that had gone undetected, quietly poisoning his recovery. Emergency intervention followed, and for the first time since his arrival, his condition stabilized. Still, emotional wounds ran deeper than physical ones. The commander rarely spoke, and when he did, his words were sharp and clipped. Grace sensed that behind his silence lived unbearable memories. Slowly, through small acts of care, she began to chip away at the walls he had built. She spoke about her grandmother, about the small town she missed, about her fears of failing. She did not expect answers. She simply filled the room with gentle reminders of life beyond pain. Over time, his rigid posture softened. His eyes lost some of their hard edge, replaced instead by weary curiosity. The man everyone feared began, quietly, to trust. One evening, a sudden power outage plunged the ICU into darkness, leaving only the dim glow of emergency lights. Machines hummed anxiously, and for a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm the ward. Grace moved quickly, checking each monitor, ensuring every patient remained stable. When she reached Commander Carter, she found him struggling, his breathing shallow, fear flickering across his face. Without hesitation, she stayed beside him, manually assisting his oxygen, whispering steady reassurances until backup power restored the machines. In that fragile darkness, something shifted. The commander realized that this young nurse, barely older than the soldiers he once led, was fighting for him with the same fierce loyalty he demanded from his team. From that night on, his recovery accelerated. Physical therapy began, grueling and painful, pushing his battered body beyond what doctors thought possible. Grace attended each session, offering silent encouragement, celebrating the smallest victories. When he took his first step, supported by trembling legs, tears blurred her vision. When he managed to walk the length of the hallway weeks later, the entire ward paused to watch, awed by the resilience unfolding before them. The impossible was becoming real. As his strength returned, fragments of his story emerged. Years of combat, of lost comrades, of carrying responsibility that crushed his spirit, had left him haunted. Survivor's guilt weighed heavily, and the injuries that nearly killed him had reopened old scars. Grace listened without judgment, offering the simple comfort of presence. In those quiet moments, he rediscovered a part of himself he thought had been lost forever. Hope, fragile but persistent, took root. The day he was cleared to leave the ICU, the hospital corridors filled with unspoken celebration. Doctors shook their heads in disbelief. Nurses exchanged astonished smiles, and Grace stood quietly at the back, overwhelmed by emotion. The man everyone feared now walked past them, steady and composed, his eyes softer, his expression humbled. He paused briefly near Grace, offering a look of gratitude deeper than words. In that instant, she understood that sometimes the greatest victories are not won through force, but through compassion. Months later, Commander Carter returned to the hospital, not as a patient, but as a visitor. He stood taller, stronger, carrying himself with renewed purpose. In a small ceremony attended by staff, he spoke about resilience, about the unseen heroes who fight battles far from the front lines. Though his words were brief, their impact lingered long after he left. Grace watched from the sidelines, heart swelling with pride, knowing she'd been part of a miracle. Just before the ending, we have a special request for you. Please comment below and share what part of this story moved you the most, or who it reminded you of. Your words might be the encouragement someone else needs today. As the years passed, Grace continued her work, carrying the lessons of that experience into every patient she cared for. She learned that fear often masks pain, and that kindness can unlock doors no force ever could. Commander Carter went on to mentor young soldiers, teaching them not only how to fight, but how to heal. Their lives, once bound by chance and tragedy, now moved forward in parallel, forever changed by a single moment of courage and compassion. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of empathy, resilience, and second chances, please take a moment to like, share, and comment. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive and reaching those who need hope the most. Sometimes the impossible becomes possible simply because one person chooses to care, and in that choice, entire worlds can change.